Let me bring in attorney John Graves. John, you've been a Million Voices, Vision America, so many things you're doing. What do you think? Are you Caleb generation or are you going to be the coward generation? I need to know.
I love that. I would say a couple things. I actually have the amplified version here, so I was reading along with you. And I want to point out 13:30 says this: Caleb quieted the people before Moses. Tomorrow, Pence can quiet the people before his boss, too. Yep. The same way. He can quiet the people. And in verse 8 of the next chapter, chapter 14, he says, if the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us. And so a lot of people spend so much time focusing on the enemy, and they also don't receive the favor and the delight of God in us. That's where we are. And so we have to walk in faith. And I agree with what Mario just said. We're going to win. Spiritual awakening is the focus, not a candidate, not a party, not this particular election. Whatever happens today, whatever happens tomorrow, whatever happens on the 20th and on, our heart is to wake up the people of God, because that's the only hope for any nation. So whatever happens here, I'm looking for God to work. I'm seeing God work. We don't lie and say there's not giants in the land. Caleb and Joshua said, oh, they're giants, but we can take them. And so that's the spirit we've got to have. We've got to walk in, be truthful and honest about the obstacles, but then also have a bigger God than an enemy.
All right, I want to bring on our first guest, KrisAnne Hall. She's traveled the country. She's defending Americans whose rights were violated by unlawful arrests and prosecutions, and is a sought-after national speaker on the Constitution. How dare she speak on the Constitution? She consults on the Constitution for numerous radio, podcasts, and television programs. KrisAnne, welcome to the program tonight.
Oh, thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here.
Well, we're so glad.
What an exciting time we're in.
It is. Other than voting, what can I go do to help? Because this isn't going to just magically all go away when the president is inaugurated. So what is it that we can do as believers of the Constitution, believers of God and what he's did and why this whole country even exists? What can we go do?
Well, it's very important that we understand that the remedy to this problem is not in Washington, D.C. And so what we must do as believers is we must get involved on the state and local level. This is not our next election. As a matter of fact, we have an upcoming midterm election in just 2 years. So right now, the church needs to get involved at the state level to have legislation passed to make sure this kind of fraud, this kind of error, this kind of disregard for law never happens again.
Okay. All right, John, let me get you to speak to that. I mean, because of what you've done with Million Voices and Vision America, what is it you see that we need to be doing? Because I know a lot of people, this is typically what Americans do. An American will go, okay, we're waiting. Okay, so Trump's president. Okay, now I can take my foot off the gas. I don't have to do anything until another 4 years.
That's exactly. There's a spiritual aspect and there's a constitutional practical aspect. So when I was studying constitutional law, I took advanced constitutional law from a gentleman who had been the chief clerk for Rehnquist. And so he made us study all of the constitutions of the world when he was rewriting the Constitution for another country. It was an eye-opening experience for me that the power of our Constitution is what she just said. It's separation of powers. It's federalism. It's not that we have First Amendment. My assignment was the Soviet Union. They have more freedom of speech, more freedom of press than we ever had, but they don't separate the powers. So the executive, judicial, and legislative branches is what is depleting, in my opinion, where the executive branch is doing everything because the executive. Now, shift gears to the practical, to the church. We can pray, but we can also get involved. Anything the church withdraws from, the darkness comes in. It doesn't matter if it's the education system, Hollywood, music, the government. Everyone says, oh, Christians shouldn't be involved. Why? Because it's messy. But that's the very thing. If the church will get back involved, run for office, vote for office, pray for those in authority, even if it's not the person you voted for, keep praying for them and continue to put pressure on them when it's not there. Don't go to sleep when your guy wins, and don't go to sleep when they don't. I can go on and on about this, on all the practical things, but the church has got to be the salt and light.
Yeah, we got to be salt and light and be of the Caleb generation. John Graves to weigh back in on this. John, with all that these gentlemen are saying with the Chinese involvement in America, it really brings the importance of this election, whether it be the Senate or the presidential election, obviously. It really brings it back to the forefront, doesn't it, of how important this is?
It really does. I respect immensely both Kevin and Frank. I know them well. They're good friends. They're two of the sharpest minds on this issue, and they have been like the prophets on the wall, trying to warn people, pay attention, pay attention. Trump has been the first president that's really taken China very, very seriously, and he's put that conversation on the forefront. Depending on what happens tomorrow, depending on what happens in the voter fraud, however that all unfolds and comes out, you're going to see that what everyone alleged for 3 or 4 years about Russia is actually what was happening with China, and it needs to be exposed. President Trump called them out, and they're mad about it because he's destroying their economy and bringing the jobs back here instead of all of our income going there.
Right.
And of course they're motivated to get involved in this whole process. And whether the virus slipped out or not, they're rejoicing over there going, well, it crippled all these other countries, including America. So
yeah.
I think it is a huge issue. I think it is a forefront issue. And if you want me to, I can go into the spiritual thing, because I think that's a big, big part of what we're facing here, not just politically, but there's a spirit going on between a nation that wants to worship God and a nation that is devoid of it. I have a prophetic pastor friend of mine that we support. He runs an orphanage. He calls it the red dragon that's coming in. America has to stand up. It's the only thing that can stand against this red dragon that's coming in. So from a spiritual standpoint, there is a war. We talk about governance. Daniel prayed, and that's what people need to keep doing that are listening to us. You keep praying, and don't be discouraged if it's delayed. Daniel prayed, and the archangels were up doing war over regions and governments and countries. We don't understand all that. We know in part, we see in part, but we know we have the power to move the heavens if we pray. And so I couldn't agree with these guys more. I think it's bigger than people want to give it credit, and people stay distracted.
Yeah, in fact, I think what we're seeing, we've all been saying, drain the swamp, drain the swamp. We found out it may be a Chinese swamp we're draining, in D.C.
Here's what most people don't think about. You can come from China and buy our property, buy our businesses, buy everything. You can't come from America and go buy their land and go buy their property and go buy their. They're just buying us. And so, I mean, it is a slow takeover. It really is.
John Graves, I know you're going to be here on the next hour to help us. Real quick, what do you think we're going to see? Call it like you see it, real quick.
You're talking about Georgia, I'm assuming.
Yes.
It has closed. I've been watching it this whole hour. It's about a 10-point lead with 45%. It's now approaching, I think, 59%, and it's now down to a 1.4% race. So this is, I think, trending well for the two conservative candidates right now, but it has not been looking good all night.